Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janice Whitaker. I'm the CGNE Administrator and Education Program Manager. It's my pleasure to serve as host of the CGNE Seminar Series, along with Jenny Rank, CGNE Education Program Specialist. This program is being provided by the Teresa Neese and Helen Diskovich Center of Geriatric Nursing Excellence at the Penn State Ross and Carol Neese College of Nursing in collaboration with the Office of Outreach and Professional Development, the Center for Nursing Research, and Age-Friendly Care Pennsylvania. Today's seminar, Promoting Well-Being of Persons Living with Dementia and Their Care Partners Using Music-Based Approaches, will be presented by Dr. Darina Petrovsky, Assistant Professor and Elizabeth C. Klipp Term Chair of Nursing at the Duke University School of Nursing. Before she begins her presentation, we do have some announcements and disclosures to make. Penn State Ross and Carol Neese College of Nursing is approved as a provider of nursing continuing professional development by Pennsylvania State Nurses Association, an accredited approver by the American Nurses Credentialing Centers Commission on Accreditation. Participants with a valid RN license that attend the entire activity and complete the post-event evaluation within 1 week of the seminar can earn 1 contact hour. Certificates will be emailed to RN participants meeting all these requirements within 1 month following the seminar. As a reminder, we do record our seminars, and they are available on YouTube if you'd like to revisit them or share them with someone else. If you have any questions or comments for the speaker, you can place them into the chat, or you can use the raise hand feature, and Jenny will unmute you so you can speak aloud. The post-event evaluation link will pop up in your browser when the webinar concludes, and it will also be emailed to you within 24 hours. This is required for RNs that are seeking contact hours, but we do ask that all participants complete the evaluation to assist with our data collection. If you have any questions or want to share anything with us, please feel free to reach out to cgne@psu.edu. Next, I'd like to introduce Haya Mohammed Al-Kabani. She's one of our wonderful CGNE affiliate graduate students in the second year of her PhD program. Haya served as a nurse educator, providing instruction in adult and geriatric courses in her homeland of Oman. Her area of focus involves the prevalence of complications in relation to risk factors in adults living with type 2 diabetes. We appreciate that Haya is here today to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Janice. Good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Darina Petrovsky is an assistant professor and Elizabeth C. Klipp Term Chair of Nursing at the Duke University School of Nursing. Prior to joining Duke in winter 2024, she was an assistant professor at Rutgers University School of Nursing and core faculty at the Rutgers Institute for Health, Healthcare Policy, and Aging Research, following postdoctoral training at the University of Pennsylvania, supported by NIH Ruth L. Christine NRS Fellowship. She earned her PhD in nursing from the University of Pennsylvania and holds degree in nursing and music from Case Western Reserve University at the University of Michigan. Her research focuses on improving the lives of older adults living with cognitive impairment through music-based interventions, health equity, focused approaches, and strategies to prevent cognitive decline. The floor is yours, Dr. Petrovsky.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you so much for your kind introduction and for welcoming me into to your school. I'm glad to be here.
You're welcome.
Right. I'm going to think we're okay. Everybody can see my slides. Okay. All right, let's get started. So I actually just got promoted a couple of days ago. So now I'm an associate professor. Duke has a two-step process. So this is a promotion and then getting tenure is sort of the next step. So I just wanted to clarify that part. Um, and I've been at Duke now for 2 years and continue to work on developing interventions in music-based interventions for individuals living with dementia. All of my work that I do is really has been inspired by my own experience with a family member, my grandmother who had dementia. And so this is a picture that I took of her I would say about, I think it was 9 to 10 months before she passed, with her beloved cat of 22 years, her geriatric cat. And so she really does inspire a lot of the work that I do. She herself had a really strong music background as well. So she was World War II veteran. She was there when there was a siege in her city in Russia. But she continued to actually work in a music conservatory all those years and really inspired me to continue my music education as well. So wanted to acknowledge her. Um, for this particular conversation, I want to share a little bit about sort of my trajectory into the field of music and dementia. I often get asked sort of why music, why dementia, why putting the two together. I want to talk a little bit about the science of music and memory and why music as a form of art is a particular um, a really good intervention to introduce to older adults with dementia, and talk about overall the benefits of music interventions in this population. And then I'll end, it's not on the slide, but I'll end talking about current arts-based programs, music-based programs that can be implemented or already being implemented in the real world. So my interest when I look back has really started, as I mentioned, I grew up in a family in a culture that really valued the arts, it really valued older adults. And so when I immigrated to the United States, I was right at the start of high school. I had an opportunity to play piano as a side gig. I mean, at that point, I really saw it as a side gig opportunity. Now, looking back, it has definitely shaped a lot of what I do right now. But obviously, in the moment, you don't think that something that you do on the side is going to be with you for the next 20 years. And so I had performed in nursing homes, libraries, retirement communities. And, I was not only honing my craft of playing the piano, but that also gave me an opportunity to connect with folks in the audience. And usually the people that I connected to who were there were older adults with or without memory concerns. And, oftentimes they would talk and come up to me and talk to me about the value that music has brought to their lives and sort of connections that they had to music that I had played. So hence I think why I became really interested. And so here's a picture of me um, playing the piano. I was working with a vocalist at that time, and my mom's in the background turning pages for me because I was not old enough to drive. I wasn't allowed to drive myself. So she came to me to all my performances and was my page turner. Here's sort of my trajectory, and it's been, I graduated with my Bachelor of Musical Arts back in 2009. So the point now, it's been, 15, more than a 15-year journey to get to where I am. But essentially, after I completed my Bachelor's of Musical Arts, I was at that point thinking about going back um, to pursue a nursing degree. And Case Western had a MEPN program, a second degree program that I that I enrolled in, and actually one of the professors at Case Western at that time, Marian Good, if any of you are familiar with her work, she was really a pioneer in establishing the fields of music and dementia and creative arts and with older adults. Um, and so that was my first exposure to a neuroscientist. At that point, I was about to take my NCLEX, and I had approached her and said, I really want to do this work. I saw this article that you've published with your PhD student. And she's like, well, that's great, but why don't you, first get your license, get your feet wet in the nursing world, and then we'll talk. And so I did just that. But the dream of pursuing a doctoral degree, remained. And so I had worked in nursing homes and at the same time applying to PhD programs. Um, and decided to go to Penn, which was a wonderful experience. Because Penn had a really strong foundations in gerontological nursing, similar to Penn State, of course. Um, and that really provided me a wealth of opportunities to pursue this work. And then I did not one, but I did two postdoctoral fellowships. That was not intentional. It was not my plan in the beginning. However, I really couldn't walk away from both opportunities. And at that point, I had my second child. I really needed a little more time to establish my research career and do all the things that I needed to do to get the papers out and to write the grants. So that was really, I really highly recommend doing a postdoctoral fellowship. That was an amazing time in my life. Well, and then I followed the more traditional sort of path in nursing research. My first faculty position was at Rutgers University. And as with, how goes the saying that you make the plans and then the plans, what you make, maybe nothing like we thought they were going to be. An opportunity came up to move to North Carolina about 2 years into my position at Rutgers because of my husband. And so I was very fortunate to be able to transition to Duke University um, to continue this work. So I just wanted to provide you, I think, for some students in the who may be in the attendance, of what a trajectory could look like for somebody. Well, let's pivot and think about, okay, why is there, how does my work fit into sort of the larger scheme of things? Well, recently, and probably I would say in the last 10 to 15 years, right, as I was finishing up my bachelor's, there's really been an influx and really this great growing interest in this fascination of how does when one engages with music, what kind of benefits does it have? And this is across the lifespan. This is, from children, from thinking about early adulthood, all the way to getting older with older adults, end of life, and other circumstances. And this, you can see this, I mean, this is a snapshot from now articles probably few years ago. But if I were to search, the news right now, we're going to find very similar headlines. And so it's nice that my work sort of, as I was developing my expertise in this area, it really nicely aligned with what sort of the public was interested in. And so some of the work I do right now really then takes the research that I do back out to the public to provide the evidence base for music-based approaches, specifically in those living with dementia. So there's a lot of the questions that I get on why I do this work is also in relation as to why music is preserved in individuals living with dementia. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the science for those of you who are really interested in that, but I'm also going to talk about how music can be as a tool to help those who are experiencing behavioral symptoms, um, as well as those who are engaging in music as they're getting older. So this is a graph that some of you may be familiar. This is from the Alzheimer's Association annual report. There's really growing, growing prevalence of individuals living with dementia in the U.S. and sort of will continue to grow. As you may know, Alzheimer's disease accounts for majority of the cases. However, we know now from doing work with brain autopsies, actually, what most likely is happening is there are mixed types of dementias that are sort of happening, pathology in the brain. It's not as clear cut as we thought. And given with the gradual rise in the prevalence of dementia, now with the more individuals turning 65 every single day, this issue of figuring out what non-drug approaches may be may work best in this population is highly significant. There's sort of I would say two buckets of studies or two buckets of research that I consider as foundational to my work. One is this notion in using large longitudinal population-based studies that participation in leisure activity overall is associated with a decreased risk for dementia. Under the umbrella of leisure activities, usually music is sort of grouped in there. It can be considered as part of a leisure activity. However, there are also studies looking at that participation directly in musical activities, whether it's playing a musical instrument, and this particular study was karaoke singing or choir singing, is associated with a decreased risk in dementia. And so there's something about engagement in music over time that contributes to decreased risk for dementia. On top of that, using cross-sectional studies, there's been many different studies looking at how do older musicians compare in terms of their cognition to age match healthy older adults. And what those studies have shown is that older musicians tend to outperform their age-matched counterparts on a number of different cognitive tests. And here's just a few examples of different cognitive tests that they do better at. So that means that controlling sort of for level of lifestyle activity, controlling for age, socioeconomic status, sex and gender, that there's something about being involved in music that has some protective cognitive effects. So all of that put together is what I think of as evidence to be able to build upon and sort of dive into the intervention work and start building interventions based on this. Some of you may be familiar with this clip. It is part of a Live Inside documentary that I would encourage you to watch. It is available, I believe, I think it's all on YouTube. But this particular clip has gone viral back in the times where going viral was not a thing. But this is a clip from a documentary focusing on the story of Henry, who in this particular clip has dementia, is very much isolated, looks isolated, looks very unable to express what he's feeling, what he wants to say. And so let's watch. I'm not going to talk anymore, but let's watch and how music impacts Henry.
I have one resident that barely opened her eyes. She didn't respond. As much as I tried, I knew her for 2 years. No matter what I tried, massage wouldn't work, nothing worked. When we got introduced to the iPods and the family told me the things that she liked, it was amazing once we put the iPod on her. She started shaking her feet. She started moving her head. Her son was just amazed. Okay, can we stop? Because now I'm getting all I'm seeing her all over again.
Hi, Papa. Hi, Papa.
Huh?
How you doing?
I'm all right. I'm fine.
Wait.
Who am I?
I don't know. Wait a minute. I don't know.
Okay, it's Jerry.
How long has he been in the nursing home? Approximately 10 years. He was having seizures, and my mother couldn't handle him at home. Of course, it affected me greatly because he was always, fun-loving, singing, every occasion he would come out with a song, no matter where he was. I remember as a child, he used to walk us down the street, me and my brother, and he would stop and do singing in the rain. He would have us jumping and swinging around poles. He was, he was good. He was always into music, always loved singing, dancing.
His name is Henry Drea.
Uh-huh.
And I'm looking more or less for religious music for him.
Okay.
Because he enjoys music and he always quoting the Bible. So I'd rather have that for him.
We first see Henry inert, maybe depressed, unresponsive, and almost unalive.
Henry.
Yeah?
Henry.
Yes, sir.
I found your music. You want your music now?
Up to you, okay?
Let's try your music, okay? And then you tell me if it's too loud or not.
Then he is given an iPod containing, we know, his favorite music. And immediately he lights up. His face assumes expression, his eyes open wide. He starts to sing and to rock and to move his arms, and he's being animated by the music.
And he used to always sit on the unit with his head like this. He didn't really talk to much people. And then when I introduced the music to him, this is his reaction ever since.
The philosopher Kant once called music the quickening art, and Henry is being quickened, he's being brought to life.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the music for 1 second, okay? Just to ask you a few questions. Okay? I'm going to give it back to you. Okay.
The effect of this doesn't stop, because when the headphones are taken off, Henry, normally mute and virtually unable to answer the simplest yes or no questions, is quite voluble.
Henry.
Yeah?
Do you like the iPod? Do you like the music you're hearing?
Yes.
Tell me about your music.
Well, I don't have one, I mean.
Do you like music?
Yeah, I'm crazy about music. You play beautiful music, beautiful sound. Beautiful.
Did you play music when you were did you like music when you were young?
Yes, I went to big dances and things.
What was your favorite music when you were young?
I guess, Cab Calloway was my #1 band guy I liked.
What was your favorite Cab Calloway song?
Oh, I'll be home there for Christmas. Oh, you can count and plan on me with plenty of snow, mistletoe, present wrapped around your tree. Ow!
So in some sense, Henry is restored to himself. He has remembered who he is, and he's reacquired his identity for a while through the power of music.
What does music do to you?
Give me the feeling of love, romance. Figure right now the world need to come into music, singing. You got beautiful music here, beautiful, oh lovely, and I feel the band of love, the dream. The Lord came to me, made me holy. I'm a holy man, so He gave me this sound. So I just say, I meet you. Say, Rosalie, won't you love me? Rosalie, won't you be sweet and kind?
It's beautiful.
I'll pause here in the interest of time. I encourage you to to take a look, I mean, to watch the whole documentary, but you can see really in this particular example, Henry does, in a very, I would say, extreme example, Henry is transformed by the music. So you can see his facial expressions, his movement. I mean, the way that he sings is very much on pitch with the right lyrics, with the right tempo. And then what Dr. Sachs is arguing in this particular clip is that the effect of this sort of bringing back somebody to being alive remains with him even beyond that initial exposure to music. And I remember, giving a similar talk to the given now years back, and I remember somebody in the audience says, well, um, why does it matter if you give somebody music if the effect of it, lasts only seconds or minutes? And my answer to that question was, individuals with dementia still, deserve, right? They deserve respect. They deserve to be given a chance to connect to whoever, is present at that particular moment. And just because an effect can last only, minutes or seconds, it is still worthy, right? To give somebody pleasure, to give somebody joy, to give somebody that connection. So it's a wonderful documentary that would encourage you to take a look at if you're um, and anyway, so then the question becomes, why do we see this really perseveration of music in different types of dementia? Surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, there hasn't been a ton of work done investigate as to why. And there's sort of two main studies that I'm going to present on. And one is from 2015. I think the second one was a couple of years later. And this is due to a number of reasons. One, obviously not everybody wants to be scanned or go into a scanner, especially if you have moderate or later stages of the disease and all that. So essentially, on a sort of a brain scale, there's sort of main processes related to how does one, gets a diagnosis of dementia. And speaking, there's sort of very simplified that there's accumulation of the amyloid plaques in the brain, which then goes through hypometabolism processes, and then eventually you see this cortical atrophy, right? The shrinking of the brain tissue, essentially. And so in this particular study, it was a two-step process. So first, they identified a small sample of health, sort of young adults, and then they were asked to bring in music that had meaning to them, and they were played that music while being in the scanner. And then what they did is that they coded several regions of the brain that were responsible for this sort of longer term memory preservation, right? And they sort of mapped them onto the brains. In the second study, in a smaller sample, they brought individuals who had a diagnosis of dementia and then match them to age match healthy control older adults. And similar, they were being asked to bring in their favorite music, and they were played that music while being in the scanner. And what they found is that when you compare the two groups, that the regions that were identified in that first study that sort of encoded this musical memory, they showed substantially lower rates of cortical atrophy. And so this sort of posits that, areas of the brain that are responsible for musical memory didn't exhibit as much sort of rates of pathology as compared to other areas of the brain, and as compared to individuals who did not have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And later, this was, not 2019, they, instead of looking at specific regions of the brain that were associated with musical memory, they looked at the connectivity between different types of the brain responsible for music memory. And so they didn't have a control group, so they exposed individuals, a small sample living with Alzheimer's disease. They asked them to bring in their favorite music, their favorite playlist. And then when they observed, in using fMRI, when they observed them listening to the music while they were being in a scanner, they saw this sort of increased functional connectivity between different networks of the brain. Sort of this, suggestion there's some sort of transient effect on brain function while one is exposed to music. So very interesting study. There's many different theories in terms of, why music is a particular important and strong stimuli for those with dementia. And there isn't one mechanism, I think, that prevails. A lot depends on the type of music that's used and the different type of dementia. But essentially, we can think that of music as being a very mentally stimulating activity or socially stimulating activity in some instances. Music, as seen in those longitudinal studies, can pan in the hypothesis of cognitive reserve. So this notion that, as individuals, similar to, occupation or learning another language, there's some sort of protective effect that individuals exposed to music over their lifetime, they don't exhibit as much sort of cognitive deficits as compared to individuals who were not exposed to music earlier in their lifetime. We know that our brains are amenable to change, right? There's this whole notion of neuroplasticity, and the fact that, consistent exposure to music can actually alter our brain chemistry. Obviously, music is a complex stimuli. It has an emotional response, there's the memory component to it, there's the social component to it that I'll talk about in a second. And music training overall, for any of you on the call who play a musical instrument or have played a musical instrument or sung in the choir or been part of an orchestra, it's a very highly specialized skill. I remember just spending hours upon hours, honing in on my instrument. It required a lot of practice and dedication. So it probably is no surprise that we see, older musicians show or demonstrate these cognitive benefits over time. One of the interesting statistics I've heard, and I haven't gotten a chance to go back and actually check it, was so don't fact check me on this one, but I heard somewhere that conductors, so conductors of orchestras, have lower rates of cognitive impairment. And I'm not sure, I can see why that is. I still have to check where that is, whether that's true or not. But this speaks to this sort of, conductors being not just aware, it's a cognitively complex activity, but they're also, standing on their feet and they're moving all the time. So they may have that sort of combination of both social aspects, cognitive stimulating activity, as well as physically stimulating activity. So something to think about. There's also this notion that music listening, people ask me, okay, well, we know that, playing a musical instrument or being in a choir is great, but what if we don't have access to those resources? Is listening to music still good for our brain? And there's actually more work coming out now demonstrating that it is actually not as passive of an activity as we think it is. Really, truly sort of paying attention and listening to music, it's a relatively active activity when we think about brain activity. And then I talked about there isn't one correct mechanism. Early in my career, this was when I was a doctoral student, I had connected with a mentor out of University of California in San Francisco, and her name is Jolene Johnson. And she ran one of the largest choir studies to date, looking at whether participating in community choirs in non-cognitively impaired older adults in San Francisco was associated with additional benefits. And they enrolled, believe it or not, 390 older adults, and about a third of the sample came from more diverse or had socioeconomic diversity. And this was an RCT where individuals were randomized into choirs, they were both English and Spanish. And then what they found essentially is that at 6-month follow-up, the only outcomes that were statistically significant and showed a reduction were a reduction in loneliness and increase in interest of life. the physical outcome, physical function outcome were not significant. And so what this does show that, there's not that many interventions out there that have the potential to decrease loneliness and increase interest in life. And so music potentially within the choir setting has that ability. I do have a video of their project was called Community of Voices. In the interest of time, I'm not sure if we have time to take a look, but this essentially follows the choirs and shows sort of what the practice sessions looks like for them. So I think we have the time to go from now. In my own work, when I was a doctoral student at Penn, I had an opportunity to do a qualitative study with my mentor, Dr. Pam Cascione, who many of you know well. And what we did is that we had a chance to go into our PACE Center in West Philadelphia, program of all-inclusive care for the elderly. And they had an ongoing choir program at that time. And we actually had 3 PACE programs. And we interviewed individuals who were participating in those choirs, and we asked them questions like, what kind of perceived benefits do you get from, singing? And of course, we didn't phrase it that way, but that's what we're aiming to find out. We also asked them questions like, why do you keep coming back? They saw very high participation rates among older adults, and they saw them coming back session after session. And what we found is that, these individuals told us that they really, had this affinity, had this love for music, and this gave them an outlet of something to do that they really enjoyed doing. They also talked about how the whole, idea of practice sessions really helped them to feel this joy, to connect with one another. And also interestingly, they talked about how the act of doing a performance for somebody else at the end of those, spring or whatever season they were in, that really gave them an opportunity to share their craft, but also sort of uplift others as well. So this was sort of both self benefits as well as other benefit as well. So I really enjoyed that study. And learned a lot. Overall, we see many different benefits for music, for different types of music. We see improved mood, we see better sleep, we see overall less stress. My specific interests are in the behavioral symptoms of dementia. So a lot of the earlier work, especially in nursing homes, was influenced by Henry's video, that Alive Inside documentary. And those studies showed that individuals who were exposed to personalized music had less anxiety, less rates of agitation, and less aggression. This is a map for a study that I did as a postdoctoral fellow when I was at Penn. And what I was interested in at that time was looking at whether music was especially helpful in improving sleep disturbances in older adults living with dementia. That time, Dr. Nancy Hodgson had just joined Penn, and so she had a large R01 that was looking at circadian rhythm disorders in this population using she was testing a behavioral strategy intervention. And so I worked as part of her team as her fellow to look at whether providing music was helpful or not. And what we found, the study, we had to stop in 2020 due to the pandemic, but I was able to enroll 33 community dwelling older adults with a diagnosis of dementia or self-reported memory concerns that we confirmed then ourselves, and their formal or informal caregivers. I provided them with tailored music based on their preferred genre of music, while also accounting for sleep-inducing characteristics of music, so specific tempo, rhythm, and other characteristics. This was a feasibility study, so that we were not powered enough to detect the differences between the two groups. But overall, I had a positive experience screening and enrolling these individuals. And overall, the qualitative feedback that we received showed that music could potentially be an important and potential helpful sleep aid that, obviously is not drug dependent. However, we ran into challenges as we learned in all the projects that we do. They ran into challenges related to the technology that was used to deliver the music. It was not really user friendly. I used a third party really meant to deliver educational videos, not music per se. And so that led me to write a career development award that was meant with two of my mentors at that time that was shockingly funded on the first try. And that never happens to me. And there are three aims that are part of this career development awards. And I'm currently in the last year of the award. But the first few years I spent developing a music app, a mobile app called Composer, specifically co-designed with individuals living with dementia and their caregivers. Then we took that original prototype and then we did a rapid cycle testing with the music app and collected additional information that helped us revamp and revise it. We are currently now in the AIM-3, finally, the AIM-3 clinical trial phase, where we then are looking at whether, in a randomized controlled design, whether individuals who are exposed or who are listening to music actually show better sleep outcomes. And we evaluate sleep outcomes both with objective as well as subjective ways. This is an overall study design. All right, so then for the last few minutes of my presentation, I'm going to provide you with a few examples of sort of current arts-based programs that are specifically focused on individuals living with dementia that you may have actually at Penn State or maybe in the area surrounding close to your university. The first example is the Music and Memory. So that original video of Henry has had so much had such a large impact on the community that this movement of music and memory was born. And it gone through several iterations, but essentially provides, if you go on the musicandmemory.org, it provides a blueprint, tools for community organizations such as nursing homes, assisted living facilities, to be able to champion and to provide personalized music for the residents. That's essentially what that is. I also learned recently that our university has a student-led chapter called Music and Memory that then pairs students with nursing homes and provides personalized music that way. So that's another interesting way to use that resource. Example 2 is this emergence of online choirs, and I'm on the board of advisory board for the Giving Voice Chorus Initiative out of Minnesota. And they have really stepped up and started providing, in the beginning of COVID, but continued to do so, choirs for individuals living with dementia and their caregivers. They also provide a blueprint and resources for anybody who wants to start a choir in their community. And they've been really wonderful to work with, and I'm learning so much from what they're currently doing. An example closer to you guys, although Philadelphia is not that close to Penn State, but closer to home is an Arts Philly program that grew out of Meet Me at MoMA program in New York City. Our own National Museum here in Durham also provides, they're called a Reflections Tour, where individuals living with dementia and their care partners, as the name implies, are invited to the museum to talk through like a curated tour to learn about the works of arts. And now we have actually music that's paired with the Reflections tour as well. And the most recent example that I have, so I have partnered with our UNC School of the Arts, and they have an ongoing program that pairs students from their program with with a senior center in Winston-Salem that provides an intergenerational music program. So we just submitted a grant. Hopefully we'll get funded. We'll see, looking at examining the impact of the program and what benefits it has both for the individuals living with dementia as well as the students who are doing these programs. This is, I want to go through this one a little bit quicker just to leave time for questions, but these are titles from NIH funded grants in the last 5, 7 years. And you can really look at really the spread of how different types of music are used to target different populations. And there's really been this increased interest in funding this work. And why there's a strong interest in funding this work is actually due to particularly two individuals. They're on the right-hand side of the slide. Renee Fleming, who is a well-known artist and opera singer, and Dr. Francis Collins, who was the previous director of the NIH. And the two of them had met, and it's a really great story if you ever want to look it up. They had met in Washington, D.C. about, I think it was 2016. And Renee turned to Francis and said, you guys fund so much biomedical behavioral research. Do you fund a lot of work, research on why we see this, why we see benefits to participating in the music and the arts on their brain? And Dr. Collins is like, well, not really, but how about, when scientists don't know the answer to the question, what do? We convene a panel of experts to help us answer those questions. And so in 2017, they put together a panel of music therapists, music cognition scientists, neuroscientists, right, to help us identify why we see these benefits and how do we better organize ourselves as a field to help answer these questions. And hence this birth of the new field called NeuroArts. And here is a link that any of you can go. It's the NeuroArts Resource Center. It's headed by NeuroArts Blueprint out of Johns Hopkins University. And essentially anybody can join that community. And it brings together, arts practitioners, scientists, anybody who has this interest, and helps us sort of organize and think about where do we move forward with it. There's been several papers, and I won't go into detail too much, based on these 2017 gatherings with Renee as well as the NIH, into sort of thinking about what is next and how do we move this field forward. So here are some sort of recommendations they had back in 2017 that then resulted into funding announcements by the NIH. And so I want to end with, sort of bringing it all together. I really, have benefited greatly from this growing momentum of exploring how sound, mental health, aging, dementia music comes together. And I think a lot about now how, that I'm writing my own grants and establishing my research agenda, how to bring disciplines together. And these disciplines, include neuroscientists, nurses, health professionals, and, thinking about why does music have such effect, and answering some of these remaining questions that I've been getting from folks as I've been presenting on this work. So here are my overall research interests, if anybody would like to connect with me. A lot of my future work that I'm going into now is actually going to look at dyadic music-based interventions and dyadic outcomes. So I'm definitely a newbie in this area, but I'm learning a lot, and I think music is an excellent stimuli to look at dyadic interactions. And I'm going to end here. Here's my contact information, and I'm happy to answer questions. Thanks.
Dr. Petrovsky, on behalf of the CGNE leadership team and all of the participants here today, thank you so much for such an interesting, informative, and really promising presentation. Such exciting work. And I love the way you combined your culture and your passion for music with your career and your work in relation to improving the lives of older adults living with dementia and their care partners. So just wonderful work. So thank you for sharing all of that with us today. We do have a lot of positive comments in the chat. Kendra Durdock says that she did experience some of what you explained related to music with her mother who had Parkinson's. Um, she'd play music and she would pretend she was playing her flute and directing it. And she would recall every word as well. Do you want to comment on that at all?
Sure. Thanks for sharing, Kendra. Yeah, I want to add a little bit about Parkinson's disease. So there's, especially in Parkinson's, there's a really strong connection between rhythm and music. And yes, we see this sort of recall, memory recall, lyrics recall, but more so, the way they use music in Parkinson's specifically is helping individuals sort of walk in rhythm to the music. And so there's many videos out there. David Lethenthal Dance Company is leading a research project right now where they introduce music to individuals with Parkinson's and they see remarkable differences in their ability to walk unaccompanied or to walk in step with music without needing an additional, walker or anything like that. So especially in Parkinson's, it has this additional benefit of sort of rhythm as well as walking speed and walking ability. Really fascinating work.
That is really fascinating. That was the word that came to mind for me as well. Aza, one of our graduate students, says interesting presentation. Thank you for explaining how the music protects cognitive function in older adults. And the role of music in protecting overall cognition and discrete cognitive domains in older adults. Her question is, do you think that music can be used as a proxy measure for cognitive reserve as education?
Yes, I think so. Other proxy measures for cognitive reserve include learning another language. We see that, so being bilingual, trilingual, and so on. The difficulty, well, I think it can be used as a proxy measure. The difficulty is sort of in the availability of those specific measures in large population-based longitudinal studies. So, for example, um, the studies, almost all of, studies like the health and retirement study or the Bronx and aging study, they collect information about education level. That is sort of part of the basic sociodemographic information they collect. So as a field of cognitive reserve and resilience, they were really able to then pull from different studies and show that education is actually a pretty good marker of cognitive reserve. The involvement with music is not collected on a routine basis as in one variable. It's usually under leisure activities or um, participation in other activities, right? So it's a lot harder for us to tease out the exact sort of defining benefit of music as opposed to music just being part of our social activity or community activity. So while I think it can be used, I think from a methodological standpoint, I think we're still far away from determining it. And some of that really fascinating work is actually being done at the University of Florida. They have an arts and aging center led by Daisy Fancourt, I think that's how you say her name, as well as the UK. So UK has really pioneered some of the work in this area, and partially because a lot of their longitudinal studies, such as ELSA, the English Longitudinal Study of Aging, does collect information on music involvement and can actually provide a little more details on that. So it's a really good question.
Yeah, excellent. Kendra also commented that she was thankful after hearing what you had to say about choirs and engagement in choir activity, that she's glad she sings in a choir and the praise team every Sunday. You provided a lot of really wonderful examples, so you're being thanked for that. And then Nawal, another grad student, says, thank you for an interesting and insightful presentation. It's inspiring to see the positive impact music-based approaches can have on the well-being of individuals living with dementia. Given the potential benefits of these interventions, I was wondering how can music-based interventions be effectively integrated into routine care in nursing homes and community settings? Are there specific strategies or frameworks that you would recommend to ensure successful implementation? Great question, Noel.
Yeah, thoughtful question. There's been some really interesting studies called pragmatic clinical trials that have come out in the last few years. One in particular that I'm thinking about was, it was a study looking at nursing, and they compared nursing homes who had a music and memory program sort of established within them compared to not nursing homes that were sort of matched that did not have a music and memory program compared to them. What they found is actually the rates of the antipsychotic use in nursing homes that did have music and memory program were slightly lower than the ones that were not. So we are sort of gathering now more pragmatically collected evidence. And obviously, antipsychotic use is a huge incentive for nursing homes. So that was really phenomenal to read that work. However, what we're finding there are additional papers that have since come out based on that original study is that there were so many barriers in implementing music and memory program, even though it has shown now benefits in nursing home residents. A lot of it, and those studies were then sort of implementation based focus. So meaning they were looking at using different implementation frameworks, such as the C4. I mean, there's like 50 of them out there, looking at which factors were really that pose the most challenges in implementing the programs. And a lot of them had to do with organizational or like the mind shift in thinking, how do we provide personalized care? And I think one of the frameworks that I am thinking about I think has taken off has to do with person-centered care and providing person-centered, thinking about what is a person-centered outcomes for nursing home residents. So, which is obviously you guys at Penn State are doing quite a bit of work on. So I would say that's probably what I think is going to take it to the next level. But it was still interesting to see, even though the program has been shown so much success, it was still not implemented to the same degree in all those nursing homes. So a
Yeah,
lot of
one of
work
our
to do.
participants today is Dawn Anderson, Director of Nursing at Juniper. And I know that they, because I used to work there myself, that they are implementing music and memory and have had, a lot of positive
Yeah.
feedback from residents and family members.
Mhm.
Ahmed is saying, great presentation. I would like to know if you have examined music therapy among care partners and the outcome measures that constitute well-being for the care partners.
So I mentioned that that's the direction I'm going in next. I did have a grant that did receive a pretty good score. In that particular grant, we're going to look at, if funded, um, of specifically dyadic music-based approaches to care. So where the music is not just targeted for the person living with dementia, but it's also used as a tool to improve relationship quality in both members of the dyad. So I don't know the answer yet. Most of the work so far has really focused on the person living with dementia, including my own work. But as I'm doing this research, right, you learn things. And, the feedback that I had been receiving from the caregivers is they say, listen, you asked me to do all these things. You want me to, help you collect the data, help you administer the music. But what benefits can music bring for me and what does it help me do? So that was a need that I saw in my own work as well as sort of as I was reviewing. And so that's the direction I wanted to go next.
Great. Again, lots of positive feedback about the impact of your work and the positive aspects or outcomes. Sarah Songer, one of our nursing alum, says thank you to CGNE for providing this program. It covers an area that I've seen mentioned in examples in broadcast media, but didn't really understand the impact and positive impact and use of everyday programming. So thank you, Darina, for really giving us so much more knowledge about this. She's also saying interesting with everyday interactions, how many people who have communication issues can communicate by singing a song with the words and that they're trying to communicate.
Absolutely, yeah. We see this. There's actually a specific type of music therapy called melodic intonation therapy, and that actually specifically addresses individuals who have aphasia, who had stroke. And so there's specific approaches how one can go from singing, let's say, happy birthday song to then eventually saying happy birthday. So there are approaches out there that's developed at Harvard.
So Dr. Sangwoo An is asking, he said he saw one of your grants, Music Care VR, and is wondering who your collaborators are on that project.
Yes, it's actually funded through the A2 Collaborative, like the Tech and VR Techie. It's out of Penn, UM Amherst, and Johns Hopkins, I think, is a third partner. My collaborator is an engineering team from University of Tennessee at Knoxville, and the last name is Tan, Tan.
Okay. And Dr. An, if you need more information, we can, share, if it's okay, Dorina, your contact information, and he can follow up on that as well. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. As I said, thank you so much for this fascinating not only presentation, but the work that you're doing to improve the quality of life of people living with dementia and their care partners. It's just wonderful. And I think we've all learned a lot today. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. And as a reminder, the evaluation tool will pop up in your browser when Jenny ends the seminar. And it will also be emailed to you within 24 hours. So please, provide feedback to us. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.